Welcome back, everyone. I will hand the call over to Senator Shoebridge. Senator Shoebridge, you have the call.
Thanks, Sir. Minister, on the 21st of April 2019, there were a series of bombings in Sri Lanka, which were declared to be terrorist bombings, and they were called the Easter Sunday bombings.
At the many churches.
And of the, indeed, a series of churches were targeted, and there were some 260 people killed. Of those, 2 were Australians, Manik Suriachi and her little 10-year-old daughter, Alexandria. In February of this year, Sri Lankan police arrested retired Major General Suresh Saleh, the country's former intelligence chief, for alleged conspiracy in aiding and abetting of those Easter attacks. You may or may not remember the history, but soon after those terrorist attacks, Rajapaksa announced his nomination for the election on a fighting terrorism and fighting violence and was elected in a landslide. Many people look back upon that now as an obscene example of manipulating the political system. Given the 2 Australians, including a little 10-year-old Alexandria, were victims, have you, first of all, are you aware of these developments in Sri Lanka and DFAT? That's my first question.
Sarah Story, First Assistant Secretary, South and Central Asia Division. Yes, DFAT is aware of these developments. We're aware of the arrest in February, as you mentioned, but also the travel ban on former President Rajapaksa that's occurred subsequently. Back at the time of those bombings, the AFP provided assistance to Sri Lankan authorities. We would need to check what, if any, ongoing connection there may be, and it may be that that's better answered by the AFP. But certainly we are monitoring those developments very closely. And High Commissioner Duckworth actually attended a commemoration in the cathedral in Colombo on this year for those attacks.
Given 2 of the victims were Australians, Manik and her daughter, have you sought a formal briefing from the Indonesian government about the circumstances and the investigation, so as you can satisfy yourself that there is a pathway to justice for these 2 Australian victims of this obscene attack?
Senator, we'll take that on notice in terms of checking with the authorities.
Yeah. And given AFP's involvement at the time, and given what we now is on the public record about the former Sri Lankan intelligence chief being now prosecuted for conspiracy about those same events, is Australia reviewing its past connections with that investigation and whether or not there was any involvement with Major General Saleh? That's my first question.
We'll have to take that on notice, Senator.
And secondly, does DFAT aware of whether or not Australia is continuing to have links, formal links, with Sri Lankan intelligence agencies and or the Sri Lankan police? Are there continuing connections, organisational connections between them?
On this issue or more generally?
More generally.
Yeah, Can we, if I can, I think that engagement would not be, or would be primarily through agencies which are not in this portfolio. So I assume Home Affairs, Border Force, AFP, but we will see what we can provide you with, Senator.
All right. And I appreciate that, Minister. And then if there are ongoing relationships, will DFAT be seeking a review of those relationships in light of this fresh evidence? And I ask it particularly, given it was my understanding that Australian agencies, and I wasn't sure whether it was AFP or other security agencies, had been involved in that investigation in 2019. So will you be seeking a review
Of broader...
of police and or intelligence agencies?
But beyond this investigation, you're asking...
In light of this investigation is my question, given it appears that Australia cooperated with the Sri Lankan intelligence agencies with an investigation, and it now appears the head of those intelligence agencies was himself a conspirator.
I understand the question, Senator. Why don't we, as I said, most of this would relate to other portfolios. I understand the question you're raising at a policy level. I'm not sure we can answer it now, but if we can, on notice, try and provide you with some more information.
Yeah, and my final question is, if you do seek a briefing and you get further information, would it be usual then to seek to reach out and speak to the family here, the family of Manik and Alexandria?
I don't. Again, I don't know if there is an approach or request from the family. I'm not going to do that via.
No.
With due respect to other people. But Ms. McGregor might have something to say.
Is there obviously families so often have many questions in circumstances like this. Where can they reach out to in order to see whether or not DFAT is able to assist? Where would they reach out to?
Senator, through our consular officers, the usual approach is if we learn of developments that would be of interest to a family and they've indicated to us that they would like us to remain in contact, then we do pass on those updates.
Yes. Well, given there's such a gap between the bombings in 2019 and these developments, it may well be there isn't a live contact, but they can reach out to get a briefing.
Certainly, yes.
If I might just move on to another matter, the PALM scheme. Minister, you would be aware of the very critical comments that the Prime Minister of Timor-Leste, José Ramos Horta, made I think in the last fortnight about the PALM scheme. I think he said, amongst other things, the concept of the PALM scheme is a good one, but the practices are flawed and the reports of exploitation are becoming too many to ignore. Were you aware of those comments that José Ramos Horta had made?
Yes, I am, and I think this was canvassed earlier, but I think you might have been out of the room, Senator, so I'm happy to deal with them again. And I want to make very clear, as a matter of principle and policy, we are firmly committed to ensuring the safety and well-being of all workers participating in PALM. We have zero tolerance for worker exploitation or mistreatment. We take allegations seriously, and the government wants to ensure investigation and compliance action is taken. I want to make this point because I think the President made reference to this in the op-ed. All PALM workers have the same rights and protections as Australian workers. And that is a change that this government has brought in. Same rights, same protection as Australian workers. That means fair pay and conditions. Ms Hutton can speak to more of the protections if you want, but I assume you have further questions. We're happy to...
I do, and I think I may have unintentionally demoted President Ramos Horta to Prime Minister, and I apologise for that. But I mean, what is clear is from the 2022 data, which is the last data published under the scheme, which the President was referring to, is that of the $1 billion that was generated for the under the PALM scheme, for wages under the PALM scheme, just 184 million made it back to the countries from where the workers' homes are, and the data shows, I think it was $999 million. 30% went to the employer in direct profits, 15% went to the Australian government in tax, 21% was spent by the workers while they were here, and only 18% went to Pacific countries. That was the data that the President was referring to. And you know, on the face of it, you can understand the criticism that he's making on an economic point. That is the latest data that's been published, the 2022 data.
Senator Jan Hutton, First Assistant Secretary, Pacific Integration Division. Senator, we publish data on the PALM program regularly. The Department of Employment and Workplace Relations collects and publishes data on the number of workers in Australia and their locations and occupations. Though going to, I think, what is the premise of your question, yes, the PALM scheme, it does provide an economic benefit to all of the partners in that scheme. Without a doubt, it provides a very significant economic contribution to our own economy, particularly in our rural and regional areas. It also provides a significant economic contribution to individual workers. They are remitting on average around $1,500 every month, and a significant contribution to their home economies as well, both through remittances but also through the skills dividend that the government has embedded in the PALM scheme.
Well, Ms. Dunn, I know my office, NGOs who follow this, have been unable to find that economic data published since 2022. I know there is data on numbers and country of origin, the nature of the work that's been performed. But is there economic data that's been published equivalent of 2022 on an annual basis? And if so, where is it found?
So there is data, Senator. Some of it is collected from independent sources. So, for example, we commissioned a survey, but the survey was conducted by the ANU and the World Bank, a survey of PALM workers. I think it was the largest survey undertaken of our labour mobility scheme. That data has been made public, and I've made presentations using that data. The data from that survey really focuses on the experience of our PALM workers. One of the key data points was 98% of workers surveyed said that they would recommend that scheme to others.
So can I just, Senator, I'm sorry we haven't been able to respond directly on why the remittances data has not been ascertainable.
Yes.
Can we please take it on notice, because I would like to understand why. It may also be we made some changes to which department was responsible for what aspects of PALM when we came to government. So aspects of PALM compliance, etc., was shifted to DUA. But can you leave that with us? I've seen data on that because when I've gone to other countries, usually my country brief has how much the remittances are in the previous, what proportion of GDP they recognise. So let us try and find, unless one of the officials can add, or someone behind me can add some light to it. We will try and come back to you on that. May be published elsewhere, but can you leave that with us?
I can, and sorry, Mr. Marshall.
Senator, yes, good evening. Ray Marcello, First Assistant Secretary, Southeast Asian Maritime Division. I do have some data points I could add on Timor-Leste specifically, if you're interested. It might help your query.
Yes.
According to information that we have, PALM workers, I think this was raised earlier in the day in terms of the remittances that they send back home. On average, they send back $1,173 each month, a PALM worker, and since 2022, from April 22 to December 2025, the total remittances for Timorese PALM workers is $200 million. And there's also a study that came from Monash University on Timorese palm returnees, and compared to non-migrants, Timorese palm returnees are more than 4 times as likely to build a house and more likely to have better quality houses, tiled floors, clean drinking water, and they're twice as likely to be running a business. They invest roughly 10 times more into businesses back home, and they're twice as likely to spend money on education for family members. So this is a study from Monash University on the benefits to those returnees.
Well, thank you for that. If you could, on notice, provide details about that study. But it does appear that there is fairly granular data, and it comes back to the question I think you took on notice, Minister Wong. And, the data will tell the story the data tells. And if it is a story that, says things have changed since 2022 and there's more money going to... let's have the data speak. And if we can get it on the public record as soon as possible, I think that would be very useful.
Well, I can tell you that the dinner I had last night with the Solomon Islands ministers, they were not only very supportive of the Palm scheme, their stories were of what it had meant to whole villages in terms of bringing income into the villages, which had increased dwellings and infrastructure and so forth, but they've been clear and are public about their request for more palm petal places.
Yeah, but again, I think there are significant concerns, and maybe they will be partly alleviated by the data. The proportion that's returned, I know there are other concerns about the remittance costs that are being paid to get money back home, but also some of the deductions that are being taken out of their wages by employers here. That 2022 data would shed significant light on it. If we do have that granular data, again, that's the way we can do what we can politically through the bureaucracy to ensure some of the most vulnerable workers in the country are having their rights respected.
Well, all I'm saying to you is that we're a Labor government and we don't want workers to be exploited. So I'm fine with you. But let me, please. But compliance is not a matter of you needing to do anything in terms of political pressure. It's the ethical thing to do. It's the government's position. All right. So just to be clear about that, I'm happy to look at this, but I do want to say to you, I think it is wrong to believe that the only way you're going to get that people will get action on this is because you ask questions and estimates. We have taken and will continue to take action against against exploitation, because it is the right thing to do and it is the policy of the government, and it is a policy we have been implementing and strengthening since 2022 in government.
Well, Minister, I never suggested, and it's wrong for you to suggest that I did, that the only way action you can take in this is through questions on estimates. But I want to put it on the record that I have been seeking to get far greater oversight of particularly palm workers in my time in New South Wales Parliament, seeking to extend the New South Wales Anti-Slavery Commissioner's remit to cover palm workers because of the stories and concerns that I'd heard as a state MP.
Which is why we've made the changes we did in 2022.
And we supported the legislation that were put forward in 2022 for the same reason. Yes, there is a role for executive government. Yes, there's a role for unions. And yes, there's a role for politics to make sure that people are made safe. So, but I appreciate you'll take it on notice. I do have some questions about Indonesia. Minister, I'm sure you're aware of the fact that Indonesia is now proposing legal changes to effectively allow the government to determine who is or isn't a human rights defender. And they're doing so in the context of 4 Indonesian military officers who are being prosecuted for a brutal acid attack on a human rights activist, Andre Yunus. The Indonesian-Australian members of the Indonesian-Australian community have reached out to me. NGOs have reached out to me, concerned that activists in Indonesia, if this law goes through, will lose critical legal protections. As you would be aware, a number of the activists in Indonesia are Australian-Indonesian dual citizens. It's part of the exchange that we have with Indonesia. Have you sought a briefing on these proposed law changes by the Indonesian government, given its potential impact on critical legal protections?
Thanks, Senator. I can address that. What I think you're referring to a report published by Human Rights Watch,
Indeed.
which picked up comments from the Indonesian Human Rights Minister, which Human Rights Watch, I think, were interpreting as what they are called vetting of human rights defenders. The Indonesian government has not proposed a law yet. We've not seen a proposal put forward. So at this stage, there are no legislative amendments that are being brought forward that we are aware of. So that we have seen that report, and I know that those perpetrators of the acid attack were arrested, and they are currently on trial. But we're not aware of any legislative amendments coming forward.
Minister, will you ask our representatives in the embassy in Indonesia to seek a briefing from the Indonesian government, or to approach the Indonesian government to get some clarification on this, and then, in light of that, take whatever action would be appropriate?
Senator, we'll, if what Mr Marcello says, I'm happy to confirm, ask the department to check that what Mr Marcello says, that is his understanding, that Mr Marcello's understanding as he has outlined it is correct. Because if it is, it's not a legislative proposal. Because I just think there has to be...
Well,
not everything. There are different ways to deal with things, and if something is not yet something that you want to make representations about, I'm not sure that representing about
I agree.
it is...
You don't want to crystallise a problem. I accept that. But could I ask you to engage with the embassy in Indonesia to seek an update, if they have any update?
Yeah, I've just said
Okay.
we'll just get the department to check if Mr Marcello's understanding is correct.
I will also say the fact that it's 4 members of the Indonesian military who are on trial, and it was a brutal acid attack, a really awful crime. As you know, in February, Australia signed an Indonesia-Australia Treaty on Common Security that involved exchange of military officers and some joint facilities. Have you undertaken any reviews to see whether or not any of the unit or units which these officers were associated with is in any way part of the exchange?
Senator, please, we are not criminal investigators in Indonesia. Okay, so let's no, we are not investigating something that you say is happening. I'll take the advice from DFAT about this, and I appreciate you have Indonesia is a close partner. It is a very important step that has been taken between us and Indonesia, and that step very much goes to Australia's national interest. I mean, I would hope, you're very critical of some relationships that Australia has. I would hope that you would understand that part of ensuring we continue to strengthen diverse relationships with as many other powers as possible is actually engaging with countries in our region.
Minister, I 100%, we should have a deep engagement with Indonesia. We should have a relationship of friendship with Indonesia. But I will say this, friends tell each other hard truths. That should also be a part of our relationship with Indonesia, the capacity to speak about difficult issues and tell hard truths. And I would have thought that if we have a treaty on common security which involves the exchange of military officers, I'm not asking for you to send Inspector Clouseau to Indonesia, but I am asking to check whether or not the units with whom these 4 military officers are associated, which is the most rudimentary investigation, are in any way involved with exchanges or support under that Common Security Pact. That does seem to be just basic due
Just be
diligence.
clear what you are saying. You are saying discontinue engagement on the basis that the Indonesian justice system is actually working and military officers are being investigated.
No,
I just don't agree with that.
That is absolutely not what I'm saying. I am not saying disengage with Indonesia. I am saying I would expect that if 4 Indonesian soldiers are on trial for an acid attack on a human rights investigation, and Australia has a treaty of common security with Indonesia under which there is military exchanges between the parties, I would expect, as a matter of due diligence, Australia would check to see whether the unit or units which these soldiers are a part of is in any way part of the exchange, given the awful nature of the crime. And if they were, to cease having an exchange with those units at least until this investigation had concluded. That's what I'm asking, and I would have thought it would be part of due diligence.
Senator, there are a lot of assertions in that. I'm not sure there's a response I can give that you're going to, accept. I think there's an Indonesian criminal investigation, which is, and we respect that process. We have potential arrangements, which you're now saying we have to rule out some cohort on the basis of this criminal investigation.
Yes.
I have no knowledge. This would be something in the defence portfolio of where those exchanges are up to, and I'm happy to ask the Defence Department to provide us with some information about that.
All right.
Right, so now I'll have to rotate the call around. I'm going to come to colleagues on my right. Senator Sharma or Senator Collins? Senator Collins? Or Collins? Collins?
Yes, I will.
All right, I've got a bit of echo here. I'm not sure what's going on. Senator Collins.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I just want to, Senator Shoebridge brought up the matter of remittances before, and I just wanted to, add that the remittance data is actually a really useful thing to have, but very, very difficult to get. There was a point at which, around about 2022, that it became increasingly tricky, and Tonga was actually the best country in collecting that data. Most of the data that you get comes from the Pacific Island countries themselves, counting the incoming money. But it will be very, very useful for policymakers to be able to understand the money going out of Australia, because obviously that's a huge part of our foreign policy and contributions that we make to the country. So I'd just like to support what Senator Shoebridge was saying before. And on that line of inquiry, I did see there was a press conference with Minister Wong, I think it was in the last couple of months or 8th of May, when she was in one of the Pacific Island countries, maybe Fiji. And somebody was asking about a company here in Australia, a registered company through the PALM scheme. I'm wondering if anybody can quickly provide, you might be familiar with the company went into liquidation, $4 million was owed in superannuation. I'm just wondering, how did that company remain approved for so long? Was anybody aware of, the financial problems it was under?
Senator Jan Hutton, First Assistant Secretary, Pacific Integration Division. I think the company you're referring to is iComply. That's an issue that the Department of Employment and Workplace Relations is responsible for, and I know have been working closely on. What I can say is the integrity of the PALM scheme is the highest priority for the Australian government. DUA did issue a notice of termination to iComply. They are no longer an approved employee under the PALM scheme.
Okay, I think also they probably did that to themselves. They no longer exist. Are you familiar with the process of approval, how often it happens, how rigorous that process is, whether you get to see the financials of company?
Senator, that's an issue for the Department of Employment and Workplace Relations.
Okay. And just as a sort of update, are you aware of whether the superannuation will be reaching the Pacific workers at any time soon? Will that be able to be recovered?
Senator, again, it's a question for Dewar, but what I can assure you is that our PALM scheme employers, they are required to meet all Australian superannuation obligations.
It's a portability question you're raising.
Oh.
Are you talking about this? I thought you went to the broader policy issue.
No.
Sorry,
it's
still on
the company that
company.
folded. Yeah.
Sorry.
It's just I just noticed it in one of the press conferences that you had at the. And I'm not. I think Minister Conroy was asked the question or answered the question, but yeah, there was a $4 million in unpaid superannuation that these Pacific workers probably won't receive, which is unfortunate for them. So just wanted an update on that.
I'd have to refer you to the Department of Employment and Workplace Relations, Senator.
Sure. Okay. Thank you very much. Changing topics now to the Cable Connectivity and Resilience Centre. Is anybody in here that is working on that? Oops. I'm just really interested. $18 million over 4 years, it seems like a really important centre that we have. Quite a vulnerability as we've seen what's happening around the world at the moment. So what are they doing in there? What are the activities that they have going on in the centre?
Thanks so much, Senator. The Foreign Minister launched the Cable Connectivity and Resilience Centre on the 29th of July 2024. So we're several years into implementation. It has a few work streams, so it's providing demand-driven technical assistance and training across the Indo-Pacific to support policy and regulatory development. It's commissioning research and analysis to support Indo-Pacific policymakers. For example, it commissioned some research on low-orbit satellites and their relationship to submarine cables. It's been convening dialogues and knowledge-sharing activities across the region. And as we've done the work, we've discovered that there's quite a lot of interest in Australia's own regulatory approach to submarine cables across the world. So we've ended up developing a best practice toolkit that's trying to support policymakers in other countries with thinking through regulatory approaches to submarine cables.
So is there more of a focus on policy advice with other countries rather than actual sort of cable investments or?
Yeah, definitely. The demand has been really around how to regulate submarine cables, but also dialogue around the security of submarine cables. But yeah, most of the demand is coming really from policymakers in other countries. Yeah.
Okay, and regular. Wasn't my children, was it?
Oh, they're being well behaved.
They are being well behaved, and they don't have mobile phones. Okay, what about sort of tangible outcomes like regulatory changes, new cable projects, improved cable protection? I mean, like that physical stuff.
Yeah.
You know, we've seen that cables are quite easy to sever. The anchors sort of dragging along the ground. So, like, is there research around that, or are there sort of tangible outcomes in strengthening these cables?
It's generated a lot of policy dialogue and discussion between policymakers and industry on those issues, and there's a lot of interest around the world at the moment on sensing equipment, which is becoming kind of more interest to people attaching to cables. Also, the potential dual use of cables is of interest. there's actually a lot of technicality around the depth at which you might place a cable in respect to managing fisheries. So there's all sorts of issues that people are particularly interested in. And as I said, it's become a platform for us to share with countries all the way to Eastern Europe the frameworks that we have in place in Australia, but also where we're looking to further develop them. So there's been more demand for, I think, the services than we could ever have imagined. Actually, it's been a really it's been a high demand activity across the whole of Asia and the Pacific. Yeah.
So are you like, are there other centres like this around Indo-Pacific, or are you pretty much the nub? And
it does have a uniqueness to it, but the United States does have not the same thing, but versions of it, and the UK has taken quite a deep interest as well. But it has definitely, I think, filled a gap. Yeah.
Are you mostly internal staff, or you've got contractors, or? So
there's a team of internal staff, and then we have a contractor, Ernst & Young, who helps they essentially have recruited some of the additional experts that we use. Okay. We're providing some technical advice for some of the countries that have recently landed their first submarine cables, who are just really setting up for the very first time regulatory frameworks. At the same time, there are countries like Indonesia who have shown a great interest in this, because they have a very complex situation when it comes to regulating submarine cables. Mm. Yeah.
And how many internal staff do you have on the team?
I think at the moment there is 3.5. Oh, yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Senator,
would you like to meet the half? Sorry, part-time.
Senator, if it's useful, just to, as a compliment, Jonathan Knaff, as of AIFFP, as a compliment to the technical advisory and the regulatory and policy work that the Cable Centre does, AIFFP is heavily engaged in the delivery of actual subsea cables across the Pacific, and if it's of interest, I can give you a snapshot of that work.
Thank you very much. I'd very much be interested in that. I've got a great big map on my wall about all the subsea cable maps, so if you could come and explain them all to me, that would be terrific.
It's getting more populated by the day, I think, Senator. Australia overall has invested about $480 million to support cable connectivity across the Pacific.
That's in partnership with Japan and the US, right?
Yeah, and a number of these have been in partnership with the US and Japan, and sometimes with New Zealand as well. This, probably one of the early examples, was the Coral Sea cable, which connected Sydney and Port Moresby and Solomon Islands. And from the AIFFP perspective, we have committed to financing or supporting 7 cables, and the overall outcome of that is that every PIF member will have at least primary, and sometimes redundancy as well, submarine cable connectivity by mid this year. We're sort of waiting on final ready for service on the East Micronesia cable.
So it's just the Micronesia cable that?
Yes, I think, well, there's every Pacific island country will have primary submarine cable connectivity by the time the EMC comes into service.
That's terrific.
So in recent weeks, for example, the Tonga Haiwiki submarine cable branch was reached ready for service on the 24th of May. Is
that the one that broke in the volcano eruption?
This is now a redundancy cable for that. Right. This is a second cable. So there was a ceremony there attended by the Tonga's royal family, 26th of May, and we contributed through AIFF $35.6 million to that, alongside a contribution from New Zealand. And this is designed to provide that redundancy, the high capacity sort of network, support the essential services, strengthen the resilience to reduce the risk of network disruptions as occurred following the 2022 earthquake. And then there's, perhaps I won't go through them all, but there's East Micronesia cable, there's the cable into Tuvalu, the Vaka cable, there's a Palau Echo cable, announcement of an additional cable into Solomon Islands, grant funding for a branching unit regional project, and technical advisory support for Timor-Leste. I can provide more details on notice if that would be.
I would love that. You can come round for a cup of tea and tell me all about it.
Thank you, Senator.
Do you, you mentioned that you do low orbit, you do research on low orbit satellites. So do you, I mean, especially in the Pacific Island countries, it's probably a good sort of backup to these cables where they can get so easily torn. Do you help them at all with trying to set up sort of Starlink style satellites?
It's forming part of the discussion. So the Pacific policymakers are really interested in the other technologies that could both complement the submarine cables but also help them to provide connectivity in really remote areas. So I think the issue for them is they're trying to work out how to regulate something like Starlink in particular, because it can be privately purchased. It doesn't go through a retailer in the same way the submarine cables are managed. So it's complicated from a revenue and regulatory perspective. So that's been a big area of interest. But we don't have a project that I'm aware of supporting Starlink rollout at the moment, do we, Jonathan?
Not through AIWFP, but I'd have to take on notice whether any bilateral programs might have supported that sort of technology. There is, as Ms Blundell says, quite a lot of debate around Starlink and competitor services, you know, Starlink being in a sense direct to consumer and other services that might go through a retailer and what that does to the market and business models. But it is obviously a very, very useful technology for improving connectivity.
Absolutely. Okay, well, thank you very much. Do you want to switch the call?
Sorry?
Would you like to switch the call?
Yeah.
Thank you.
If you got more questions.
I could ask some more if you want me to.
We're happy to not go till 11.
No, I think that's the plan, but just hang on a second.
Well, I'll just ask 5 minutes of questions if that's okay. I can do this, but wrap it up.
Okay, cool.
I just want to understand the process of information handling of protected information, or the handling of protected information. Is anybody here that can help me just understand the process of that? How DFAT sends protected information around?
You mean like IT communication? Or?
Yeah, like, you know, you send it electronically. Is that how it happens? Is that right? Distribution lists?
I think it's IT.
Good evening, Senator Collins. Craig McLaughlin, Deputy Secretary, Chief Operating Officer. Can I just ask you to tease a little bit more about what you mean by protected information, how we communicate between posts with other people? Or?
Yeah. So, you know, posts overseas, how you get, I guess, need-to-know information to, you know, overseas. I mean, you're not going to take it over in a briefcase anymore, are you? So you take it electronically.
So we have computer systems. Essentially, we have a high-level system. You might describe it as, we describe it as Saturn High for classified information, highly classified information. We have a protected network that we use for protected and official level information. They exist essentially between here in Canberra, state offices, and then almost every office that we have overseas.
Okay, and you have it's sort of separated between. Well, I'm not on your business, so the need to know and the not need to know.
So information is divided through classification, stretching from, if you like, unofficial, which is essentially unclassified, going up through the various classification levels. Secret is the point at which information would have to go onto the high system.
Yep.
And then information is compartmentalised again for a need-to-know basis.
Okay.
And it may be that a post would communicate to Canberra, we might communicate to that post, and in some cases Canberra might send out a message that would go to all posts.
Okay. So with information from NIC agencies like AUSTRAC or AFP, those products would be provided to DFAT to then be distributed to post?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
They may communicate directly to their own people overseas.
Okay.
Yeah, also. Yeah.
But to DFAT staff?
No,
so DFAT staff.
So information would be communicated between agencies to whomever has a need to know that information.
Yep.
Depending on the agencies, it may be that it might be communicated directly to those officers posted overseas, and in some cases it may be communicated using a DFAT network to do so.
Okay. And I understand that at some posts, so does DFAT headquarters receive reports on the low system and then you send it on the DFAT system? Is that how it works?
What reports from whom? Sorry, Senator.
Well, from NIC agencies. So let's say you've got to get stuff to, NIC agencies provide you with a report, you've got to get it to post.
So we have a separate system for
Okay.
that, and that is provided from NIC agencies to Capital, to DFAT Canberra.
Okay.
That's communicated through a separate system.
But it's still, so at some posts overseas, there are email distribution lists for staff at the embassies, is that correct?
You're sort of going into a level of detail that, how much we really want to unpack in a public forum. I'm not so sure about.
I understand. All right. And you can, I'll go through my questions. You can ask what you can answer how you can and how you can't, but I'll just make my way through these questions if that's okay with you.
Sure.
So some reports are emailed to those posts, is that correct? So they might...
So information can be communicated, generally speaking, to posts from Capital via email.
Yep.
Or more typically through the cable system.
Oh, the cable system, okay. Yep. All right. And in the posts, you have locally engaged staff, and they would be on distribution lists, is that correct?
Locally engaged staff do not have the same level of system access as A-based or posted officers.
Okay. So there would be no locally engaged staff that would be receiving any kind of need-to-know information?
Well, need to know or highly classified. They don't have access to highly classified systems.
Highly classified, yep.
But they may have a need to know administrative information that helps us run the post. That might be information that reports, financial outcomes, travel, these sorts of things.
Okay, so there wouldn't be any LES on those email lists? No. Okay.
Senator, if you have a particular question, we'll see what we can do with it. I am reluctant to have a lot about how we deal with information at different levels of classification in a public arena.
Yep, I understand.
So
I understand that.
if there's a particular issue, I have no idea what you're reading from. If there's been some suggestion of something, you can put that to us. Now, I'm not trying to avoid the political kind of point, but I don't really want a lot of the... we deal with a lot of information and a lot of communication, and we have to be very careful about how we deal with it, and we are.
Yeah, I understand, and I'm not trying to do a gotcha moment here. I'm trying to understand the process. I want to make sure that the information is treated appropriately as well, and that ELS aren't getting information that they shouldn't.
I'll just say in summary that we take enormous care on classification and distribution of information, whether it be sensitive personal information, sensitive commercial information.
Swearing again,
Don't do it again, mate.
I'll be repenting a lot at church on Sunday, that's for sure. Scare the shit out of me.
Sorry.
You're just trying to get on Channel 7
Good to see
again.
you, Barbara. How are you? Yes, you can sit up there. I'll give you questions. Yeah, well, whew, got my heart rate going there. Sorry, Senator.
That's okay.
Might rotate the call.
That's right. I just wanted to get assurance that
We have very
been one of those
We have
weeks.
very sophisticated systems to take all
The
those
kids aren't, yeah.
sensitivities and national security and NIC classifications into account.
Thank you very much, Secretary. I'm finished. Thank you, Chair.
Gave me a heart attack, mate. All right, thank you very much, Senator. Senator Barbara Pocock, hello. Welcome.
Sorry, I've
Gotta
scared
give me
you
a
within
warning
an
when
inch
you
of
do
your
that.
life.
I know. Just came up behind me. Anyway, hello. I take it you've got questions.
I do.
That was okay. Well, fire away.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few questions, several lines. Might get them done in one block. In my questions to DFAT at estimates on 12th of February this year, I sought details on the nature of the July 2025 breach of DFAT's ODA-related tender process, including the programs it related to, the value of the contracts, the tenderers involved in this breach and the outcome of the breach. The response I received to question on notice number 260 specified 2 programs where tenderers were excluded from consideration, but neither provided the names of the tenderers nor the specific causes for exclusion. So I'm asking, what was the information provided in their tenders that led DFAT to conclude a, quote, real or perceived conflict of interest, and what are the criteria applied to arrive at this conclusion?
Thank you, Senator. Natalie Cohen, First Assistant Secretary, Development Programming Division. Thank you for your question and referring to those breaches that we responded to in the question on notice. So, sorry, you asked what was
the information provided in their tenders that led DFAT to conclude that there was a real or perceived conflict of interest, and what are the criteria applied to arrive at that conclusion?
Thank you. So the information, which I think I gave in my evidence when we spoke about this at the last session, was that it was it referred, the tender submission referred to a DFAT officer's name, and so therefore that was a breach of the conditions to declare any potential conflict of interest.
Yeah. And so the kind of criteria, that's one criteria for arriving at that kind of conclusion. Are there other criteria other than specifically naming, clearly indicating that you've got a prior relationship that's inappropriate to be relying on? I assume that's what that's about. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's right, Senator. There are a number of things that we ask the tenderers to complete, a number of sort of conditions that we ask them to attest to. And so that would include things like conflict of interest or other sort of potential confidentiality breaches or obligations. So it's those kinds of things that we're looking for, and it's quite a detailed list that we check that all of the tenders have conformed and attested to that sort of information. Yeah, I don't have the full list here with me, but I could provide that on notice.
Thank you, that'd be great. Managing contractors are required by DFAT, I understand, to sign confidentiality clauses to prevent the circulation of commercially advantageous information gained through a design of programs to their business development functions. Are tenderers for design contracts also required to sign clauses stating that they will not participate in any aspect of that program's implementation and evaluation?
Senator, they don't need to attest that they won't participate in the implementation. They do need to declare when they apply, when or if they tender to do the implementation of the program, they need to provide advice that they worked on the design.
So and they can design and then they can apply to implement?
Yes, they can do that under our current rules. We do have a number of processes that we put in place to manage the conflict of interest or potential advantage, competitive advantage that will come from that. And I can step through those, but it includes a range of attestations and declarations, but also things that we do to level the playing field, such as making sure all of the information that's available about a program, previous evaluations or design documents are all shared. We do a two-step tender process where we have an expression of interest received, and then the shortlisted tenderers take part in briefings with us so that we can go through all of the additional information. So that's about trying to make sure that everybody that's bidding for the implementation has access to all of that information. However, I would note that we are aware, as I think the premise of your question is that there is potential advantage, and so we want to make sure that we have a strong competitive process and get the best possible value for money in these processes. And so we are looking at how we can prevent this in the future. There's a current procurement process underway, so I don't want to speak too much about that, but it's basically establishing a panel of a new, refreshed and larger panel of companies, suppliers that will be able to do the design of our development programs. And in establishing that panel, we are attempting to have a much bigger, broader and more diverse pool of suppliers able to do the design, and so therefore to improve the sort of pool that we're able to access, because at the moment a lot of the same companies that do the design are the same ones that do the implementation. So we've been working for some time to diversify that market, and we've also got this current procurement process underway, the aim of which is to broaden and diversify our pool of suppliers specifically for design, as well as some other parts of the program cycle. So
the procurement process that is underway is to procure a process towards establishing a design panel. Is that what you're talking about?
No, sorry, Senator, if I wasn't clear, it's a procurement process to establish the panel.
Okay, to establish a panel.
So Senator would have like a broad panel of design, monitoring, evaluation, governance, different sectoral expertise we need. That panel that our posts or others can draw people off or draw contractors off to be able to do that particular element of work. So as Ms Cohen said, one of the things we've looked at doing is how do we ensure that we've got a broad diverse of individuals, companies that we can be utilising for often complex designs in complex working environments, to ensure that we can move to an arrangement where there won't be an overlap, or there won't be a situation where the company that is implementing has also done the design, and we can make that clear separation. Yeah. But we need to have this arrangement in place to be able to ensure that we've got the expertise and diversity to be able to do the designs that we're often needing to put in place across Southeast Asia, the Pacific, and then be able to have an arrangement where we can go out to market, as Ms Cohen said, to then secure the companies that have got the breadth of technical expertise or implementation to do some of these larger programs.
So if I understand correctly, you're moving towards a separation through establishing a design panel, but you do expect there to be a corridor between and a mutually exclusive, or there'll be separate.
That is where we're wanting to move to.
That's where you want it. When do you expect to get there?
Well, I think as Ms Cohen said, they're in the process at the moment of procuring that element without going through all the details of that arrangement, what one would hope in the not too distant future, but why don't we come back in next estimates and give you an update?
Great, that'd be great.
Senator, if I could just also add on the evaluation side of the question you were asking. We do have an evaluation policy in place that is very clear that if you were the contractor or organisation, be that an individual or a company, that implemented the program cannot evaluate its own program.
There is a separation of value.
That's right.
Well, that's important. It seems to me, just responding to you, and I look forward to hearing further, that just giving competitors who have no information or had no involvement in design more information doesn't necessarily wipe out that advantage they have with, you know, intimate knowledge of what design is. So good to hear that you're moving towards that separation. I wanted to continue to ask about conflicts of interest. In the context of I've got a private members bill to ban unethical contractors from getting government work for up to 5 years where they're shown to have behaved unethically or illegally, and don't we have a lot of examples in our daily media? I asked how DFAT can or does exclude tenderers from further consideration. The response pertained to exclusion from the specific tender and not from all other tenders in a whole of government context, including and beyond a DFAT. Why were there no consequences for these tenderers, those who've behaved poorly, beyond exclusion from their specific bidding processes?
Senator, are you referring to the two examples that were provided in the question on notice, or are you speaking more broadly?
I'm asking a broad question. Yeah. When someone has behaved badly, I understand they're excluded from the specific project, but I'm wondering why they're not excluded from the whole of government context beyond that project.
In the examples that I'm familiar with,
right.
I would say that the breach was, we sort of look at that as proportionate and in context, and it wasn't severe enough that we would have considered that it needed to be a broader exclusion. Okay. However, should it be a serious enough breach, potentially also something that we saw occurring or recurring, then we would absolutely look at a broader approach.
In response to my earlier question, DFAT also mentioned that if information is received regarding potential conflicts of interest, you consult with a probity advisor on the proportionality of the risk, which you're just referring to there, or the concern, and then you make a decision to exclude. So you take proportionality into account. Just how do you judge proportionality? Give me an example, just to illuminate that a little if you can.
Yeah, I think, Senator, in the examples I'm familiar with, as I mentioned before, it might be something where we consider whether this is a recurring issue or not. And also, sometimes after we speak to the companies, you know, when the process is finished in the debriefing, we can see that things were, you know, what you might call mistakes or miscommunications, that kind of thing, and potentially not a sort of a deliberate and very considered approach. So those are the kinds of things that we would take into account in considering the proportionality.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. Also, the probity advisors, I understand, are external parties contracted to play a consultative role and cannot independently decide on the exclusion of tenderers. You're nodding, thank you.
That's
are there
correct.
cases where DFAT's decision has been different from their advice, the probity advice?
I think, thinking just in very general terms, the probity advice, if it's something that's a very complex matter, sometimes the advice will be sought from the probity advisor and provided to the evaluation committee if the tender process is still in that part of the cycle, or to the delegate, the financial delegate. And so there may be times at which a financial delegate is aware of other information that needs to be taken into account. I can't think recently of an example where we haven't taken the probity advice, but absolutely there are some complex situations where we need to weigh up a range of different things, and that financial delegate might be somebody quite senior in the department if the amount of money that the financial value is quite high as well. So that it may be that there's a complex context to take into account.
Okay, well, thank you for that. My last line of question is around the cooling off and the revolving door issues in the sector. In my question to you in estimates on the 12th of February, I sought details on the rules regarding personnel who move from the department to working for managing contractors or from managing contractors to the department, and whether DFAT keeps track of employees who are subject to such a cooling off period. And so I'm reiterating my request for details on how the behaviour of employees is tracked during the cooling off period and those details weren't provided to me, so I'm still looking for them. How you keep track?
Senator Belinda Caston, Chief People Officer. Obviously, some of the evidence from Ms Cohen has touched on some of the work we're doing at the sort of whole of enterprise level, and acknowledge there's obviously a big body of work that happens between our respective areas. We've recently put some additional advice out to staff and managers to better articulate some of these issues with staff, not just coming into the department, but I think it's on departure from the department that we had some work to do. So we have done some advice to staff recently just to try to draw out these issues a bit more clearly. The policy setting is that all employees have to inform the department immediately if they're approached with a formal offer of employment or if they apply for employment, where a real or apparent conflict of interest between their current official duties and the proposed future employment could arise. And then we obviously go through implementing a plan to manage access to official information, to resources, etc. And that goes particularly, as you'd expect, to working on or advising on contracts or grants to which DFAT is or is proposed to be a party. So particularly for staff who've been substantially involved in the design or preparation, appraisal, review or daily management while they've been at DFAT. Also, another sort of point of clarity is anything that substantially involves any employee of DFAT with whom they had a significant contact in the course of their employment. So again, it's trying to really improve the advice that goes to staff to manage that. I think we've touched in the response to the question I noticed about what those policy sort of parameters are. And as I said, we've just recently updated the department's Ethics, Integrity and Professional Standards Policy Manual, which is available on the internet as well as obviously internally to staff, just to raise awareness of those updates to the policy. And so the other thing that we've done with those updates is just to make very clear the requirements under the Lobbying Code of Conduct as well. Obviously, that's an important thing for us to cover in that advice as well. So that information has been circulated to staff recently, and happy to take any sort of further questions on the detail of that.
Thank you, Ms Casson. I would like to seek details of any such conflicts over the last 5 years, with the details of the position of the staff member at the time of the conflict arising, their employment status, whether APS, SES, contractor or LES, and the nature of the conflict, including whether and how it was mitigated. That would be, if you could supply that on notice, that would be great.
Thanks, Senator.
What are DFAT's mechanisms, if any, for receiving and acting upon information regarding conflicts of interest which were not disclosed by the staff member? So someone else lets you know that they do see a perceived or actual conflict. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, we have pretty advanced mechanisms, including for staff, persons who are external to the department to lodge that through the website. So it's not just through internal mechanisms, although that's obviously a path that we encourage people to be aware of inside the department. So that information comes in through, as I said, we have an internet page that is alongside the ethics manual, so that it's clear that there's a pathway for people to make complaints or to raise issues with us or things to identify. And of course, then there are mechanisms available to staff inside the department as well. We do a lot of communication, certainly inside the department, to make sure that staff are aware of how regularly they need to keep their documentation about their conflicts of interest up to date, and the processes for doing that. But we have, as I said, good external mechanisms for folks to make information available to the department that we can then investigate.
So could you give me details in the same way as I just asked for the earlier issues, details of any cases over the last 5 years where those conflicts of interest weren't disclosed by the staff member, including their position at the time of the undisclosed conflict arising, their employment status, nature of the undisclosed conflict and whether and how it was mitigated, and any consequences arising from the failure to disclose?
Senator, I'll just step in to say that, of course, we won't be disclosing private personal information of individuals.
Not looking for that. Just looking for an indication, names to be removed, absolutely, but I'm looking for an indication of how many.
Well, positions are equivalent to names if they've got also dates. So I'll see what we can do, but I just want to flag that we, of course, wouldn't be providing
I'm not
private
asking for
information.
dates. I'm asking for the position, their employment status, the nature of the conflict that wasn't disclosed in this second case, and whether and how it was mitigated. I'm not interested in the individual. So if there's no timing, unless it's a one-person show, you should be able to give that information.
If it's position in terms of public service level, that
it's not, I'm just
ambiguous, but position...
I'm not asking for their level, I'm asking for their status.
Well,
a specific thing.
That is what you asked for, actually. You asked for position. So, but that's okay. Rather than have an argument...
let me clarify.
Can I just respond, please? I've not interrupted for a very long time, so... Just let me say this. Let's not get into an argument in the abstract. You've asked for some information. The Secretary will look at it. And if you don't agree with what decisions are made about what to disclose or not to disclose on the basis of the Secretary's answer, then obviously you have an opportunity to ask those questions again. I'd prefer not to have an argument about abstract, if possible.
I don't want to have an argument, but I haven't asked for the position, Minister. I've asked for their employment status. That is, whether they are in the APS, the SES, a contractor.
I thought you said position in relation to the first set of questions, because I was going to...
Same criteria for both. Right. Thank you. The requirement that all former staff, including contractors, refrain from working or advising on a DFAT contract or grant where they were substantially involved in design, preparation, appraisal, review or daily management while at DFAT appears to apply in perpetuity after their separation from DFAT. Can you confirm whether I've understood that correctly?
No, Senator, we have some time limitations on that are different between SES and non-SES. So we have 12 months prior to separation from DFAT or 9 months after separation from DFAT, depending on the level. So, but we can, and obviously the lobbying code of conduct also has a distinction for SES and non-SES staff, but we can provide some information to you on notice about that.
Thank you. So it's 9 months and 12 months, you said, sorry?
Yes.
Yes. How do you verify that that is being honoured?
Senator, I think obviously it does depend on the situation and the type of work that they might be engaging on. One of the things we're aware of and mindful of is that if people leave the employment of the public service, they are entitled generally to take up a role and earn an income. We're obviously mindful of that. So there is obviously sometimes we need to sort of take a case-by-case approach to that. It is, as I said, we've done some work recently to sort of draw staff's awareness and managers' awareness to the changes that we've made to our policy to try and sort of improve the awareness of the policy settings. So I think obviously this is something we've sort of made the policy changes and we're working through implementation at the moment. So it's probably something we can come back and give you in more detail at the next estimates.
Thank you. Thanks very much, and thanks for all your answers. Thanks, Chair.
All right, good to see you again. Next time, give me a bloody warning. The Jesus out of me, okay? All right. I think I need a doorbell or something. Anyway, we're just going to take a very short suspension for a couple of minutes. So we'll do that now, and then we'll come back. Thanks, everyone. How to go back? All right, we're back. Now, Senator Sharma.
Thank you.
That's you. Yes, you've got the call. Please be quick.
I wanted to ask about DFAT's property move in Canberra. So I understand there's a building at 19 National Circuit that you'll be moving into soon, and then you're also becoming a tenant at the National Security Precinct. Is that you, Mr. McLaughlin? Great, thank you. So I asked Finance earlier in the week about the National Security Precinct, and they confirmed that you were an anchor tenant. So how long is and I understand you've also got a project underway under construction at 19 National Circuit.
Correct.
So what's the sequencing of those completions and moves?
19 National Circuit, we expect to be practical completion by the end of next year, and then there'll be a degree of fit-out that will be required following that. Finance is managing the build at NSOP, the former car park, with which I'm sure you're familiar.
The one with all the cranes.
Yeah. It's due for practical completion by the end of 2028, and then there'll be probably 12 months to fit it out for us, assuming Finance can proceed with the build on time.
Okay. So this phrase has been overused this week, but the optimal pathway is that you're into 19 National Circuit at the end of 2027 and the National Security Precinct at the end of 2028?
No, practical completion of the build by end of 27 for 19 National Circuit. There will then require some time for us to fit it out with all the IT and so on inside. That's about 6 months. Practical completion of the NSOP is 2028 with about a 12-month fit-out time.
Okay.
But does the landscaping have optional pathways?
I said it, I couldn't possibly comment.
So what's our current leasing arrangements for what are your current leasing arrangements for the current portfolio?
Okay, so just to give some context as to the decision, when this was occurring and when we went to market for 19 National Circuit, we had 3 of our 4 leases in Canberra were expiring in 26 and 2027. We have now extended those leases just for a short holdover to allow the completion of these projects. So at the end of the projects, we will hold all of Canberra premises in Barton.
Okay, so the leases you've got, so that's...
So we have 4 leases. Oh, sorry, there are actually 5 leases, but at the time there were 4. We have a lease at 255 London Circuit, which is where the old Ausaid building was located. We have a lease at 51 Alara Street, also in Civic.
Yep.
We have a lease at 44 Sydney Avenue, and we have about 200 square metres at 39 Brisbane Avenue.
Okay. And sorry, RG Casey, is that leased?
RG Casey is also leased, but that expires in May 2031.
Okay. So on these other properties you mentioned, the non-RG Casey ones, you've had the lease extended?
So yes, we've executed lease extensions for 255 London Circuit, 51 Alara Street and 44 Sydney Avenue, just so we can align the project completion times.
So when have those leases been extended until?
Just one moment. So Alara Street and London Circuit have been extended into 2028 and 44 Sydney Avenue has been extended to 2029.
And have you got the month in those years, 2028 and 2029?
I'll come back to you with the dates of the actual lease extension too. Sorry, Senator, I will get this for you.
No, that's quite all right. That's no problem. Can I ask, just whilst you're looking for that, what's the expected future of the RG Casey site? I guess that's up to the landlord.
It's up to the landlord.
Okay. Have we got any conditions on our departure? Like we need to make good the premises, or?
So there are conditions that we, under the lease, we can choose just to vacate. We don't have to make good, but if we remove something that we may have installed, then we have that obligation to make that good.
Okay. Okay. And you said the lease on RG Casey is until 2031?
Yes, that's correct.
Isn't it? I mean, I understood from finance that the National Security Precinct's likely to be ready to accommodate people before then. Is there an option to, would we move before then if possible, and if so, can we break the lease?
Well, it's not where you don't work for DFAT anymore. That's the first point. The second point is these really are matters for finance, not for the department.
Sorry, Senator, Minister, I was talking we, the Australian Government, or the Australian people.
The Australian Government's not moving.
If you object to that, I'll stop using
No, the Australian Government's not moving. This part of the Australian Government will move, along with other parts, but you're not moving.
Thank you, Senator. Well, Minister, I think these are perfectly relevant questions, and I am keen to hear the answers.
What was the question? You want to know if we considered moving earlier?
No, I want to know what the options are on the RG Casey building if we're able to move early, and I wanted to get the expiry dates of the other leases.
What the options are? What do you mean? For the landlord?
No, for us, because the lease runs until 2031 and the National Security Precinct.
I assume in the circumstance, if we're able to move January 2030 and the lease doesn't expire on RG Casey until January 2031. Unless Suzanne has the answer right now, then I suggest we take that on notice.
So we will move as soon as we're reasonably able to. I think we need to keep in mind that after you've reached practical completion, there is then a period for DFAT to do its own fit out, its own IT installation, its own security overlay. And then we do not have to actually get everything that we don't want. We need to decommission the old building. So there's still a process that has to be undergone for us to fulfil our obligations under the existing lease and to hand it back as we're required to under the lease. So this is why we have extended the leases to allow those processes to occur, and I'm still looking for the dates. So, but
that's fine. You're welcome to take those on notice if you'd like.
Yeah, but I do know that, yes, that they've, I just don't have the exact months, but I know that 2 have been extended through to yeah, we'll take it on notice.
Okay, thank you.
All right, you done on this?
On this topic, yeah.
Yep. I'll rotate the call.
Okay.
Senator Shoebridge.
Thanks, Chair. Minister, I know we've spoken before about Robert Pether, and I know you answered some questions about Robert Pether, I think asked by, it was Senator Patterson. But I have been in continuing communication with his wife Desiree, and it's really on her behalf that I'm asking these questions. Are you aware of the medical reports DFAT has received, very alarming psychologist report and the melanoma report in relation to Mr Pether?
Senator, thank you for your question. Look, out of respect to Mr Pether's privacy in this forum, I would not go into details about his health.
Have you received medical reports in relation to Mr Pether in the last 20 weeks?
Senator, I think you made the point in relation to other matters, how careful we have to be about disclosing any medical information. I think I made comments in February about Mr Pether's case. I want to acknowledge the immense toll that his detention and travel ban has on him and his family. I've publicly called on the Iraqi government to lift his travel ban on humanitarian grounds and in recognition of our long-standing bilateral relationship, and I make that call again today. And I make that call with more urgency, given concerns for his health and the length of time that he has spent away from his family.
Minister, we have touched upon this before, but at the centre of why Robert Pether is being held in this most unjust situation in Iraq is the officials associated with the Iraqi Central Bank continue to make utterly unsubstantiated claims of demands of some $12 million against him and a co-worker. And I'm advised that whilst those claims had gone into abeyance at the time that Robert was released from custody in Iraq, but still prohibited from leaving Iraq, I'm told that the Iraqi Central Bank placed those demands again on the table in interactions with Australian officials earlier this year. Is that the case? Have they reasserted those demands?
I think you were briefed on these, on Mr Pether's case. I'm very reluctant, given that the sensitivity of these matters, to go into these sorts of details in this public forum.
Well, to be clear...
So I'm just, you know, well, you may say, you know, whatever Mrs Pether wants, but I have an obligation to also try... We have obligations about trying to conduct this consular set of representations in the most professional way possible. So I'm not going to, and normal officials go through chapter and verse of who is saying what to whom.
Well, I want to be clear.
You wouldn't expect us to.
No, I want to be clear that I appreciated the briefing, but I want to also be clear that everything I'm putting to you, I have received through Robert's wife, and I'm grateful for her diligence and obviously her deep love and continuing love for Robert. But everything I'm putting to you, I've received from that source. The one point of real, genuine pressure that the government can exert over Iraq is actually directly associated with the Iraq Central Bank. We continue to provide funding for the Iraq Central Bank, and yet at the same time it's the Iraq Central Bank and officials with it who are making these unsubstantiated demands against Robert Pether, an Australian citizen who is in desperate health situations. And I ask on behalf of Desiree, why will the government now not revisit this situation and say to Iraq, if you want us to continue to provide these fundings, release Robert, let him return home? Because, I mean, I'm sure you can understand this from a lifetime partner's perspective. When her government is funding the very institution that is unfairly keeping her husband in a foreign country like this, you must understand Desiree's position.
We continue to advocate on this very long-running and difficult case with Iraq.
Well, but my question was about, will you put a timetable on withdrawing the funding, reducing the funding to the Iraq Central Bank that Australia is giving? We are literally funding the very institution that is at the core of why Robert is in this appalling situation in Iraq. Why not use that as a lever?
Sorry, Senator. This is assistance to counter financing for terrorism and transnational crime. Okay, so this is not some gift. This is support for countering and combating the financing of terrorism and transnational crime. So I'm sorry, but that funding is provided for Australia's interests, because we think we should work with other countries to counter financing for terrorism. So you can put that to us. The position is we're traversing exactly the same ground, I think, as... Thank you. Ms McGregor can probably do more, because I thought we'd just traversed this at the last estimates, and I don't propose to do it again.
Well, but yes, that was the position put.
It's not.
No.
It was the position. Please don't say that. It's not the position.
It is a position.
No, it is the facts.
It's your political position that
because
of the importance of it, you say...
No.
Let me just finish my question, Minister.
Senator, can we at least agree? It is a fact that the funding is about counter-terrorism and what was it, transnational crime.
Yep.
Whether you say that is reasonable or not is a position.
No.
Those are facts. Let's not
I'll tell you the other
what
fact.
I do with the. Sorry, can I just finish? You're not entitled to your own facts.
Well, indeed, and nor are you entitled
views.
to your own facts.
No, but I'm telling you what the facts are.
But I'll tell you another fact. Another fact, and
This
it's
is the Shoebridge universe again.
It's another fact. It's the Wong universe that I'm confronting. Another fact is that the institution we're funding is the Iraq Central Bank, and it's that institution that is making grossly unsubstantiated claims of $12 million shakedown claims against an Australian citizen, which means he can't leave the country. His health is grossly deteriorating. He may die in Iraq. So yes, you're providing funding to that institution for that purpose. But my question is about that institution itself. That is a fact. You may want to talk about half the facts, but I want to talk about all the facts.
Well, that's a very loyally reframe. Well, Senator, the gravamen of your proposition is that you want us to stop funding these programs with the Iraqi Central Bank because of this case.
Correct.
And I'm saying that that it is, we believe it is the right position for an Australian government to assist in measures which are about combating the financing of terrorism and transnational crime.
And what I also say to you...
But we have a difference of views. You put it, do we have...
The additional point I'd put to you is this. Looking at how this institution has responded in this case against an Australian citizen, it continues to progress. This shakedown, this outrageous shakedown against an Australian citizen, does that not put questions in your mind about the ethics and capacity of that institution to effectively spend the money we give it?
Senator, can I add a comment here? It's Ralph King, First Assistant Secretary, Middle East and Africa Division. It's AUSTRAC that cooperates with the Iraqi Financial Intelligence Unit of the Central Bank of Iraq to build financial intelligence capacity through training, scholarships and placements. The FIU is the government agency responsible for assessing suspicious transactions to prevent money laundering and terrorist financing, as demonstrated in the recent address of Kazim Hamad. Australia and Iraq have shared interest in law enforcement, and our cooperation with the CBI has operational benefits for Australian agencies, including AUSTRAC, AFP and the Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission, and supports information exchange on transnational crime, which is what the Minister has just mentioned.
Yes. The lateness of the hour, I will move on to another matter, but thank you for that, Dr. King. Minister, I asked you previously about funding that was going to the Philippines for a program in the Philippines that has been criticised by human rights activists, by unions, by NGOs of engaging in the process of red tagging, where unionists and others. And I note that you took on notice whether or not Australia had raised the cases of Frenchie May Cumpio and Marielle Dumaquil, two young, brave journalists who were targeted through those red tagging laws. And I appreciate the response where you said those matters has been raised. What was the substance of that exchange with the Philippines about those two brave young women who are unfairly incarcerated?
I can take this. Thanks, Senator, for the question. Ray Marcello, First Assistant Secretary, Southeast Asia Maritime Division. I note your question on notice as well, Senator, where we did... Sorry.
Mr Marcello's voice doesn't need that much amplification. It's fine.
The resonance. Where we did note we made representations for those two journalists. I can add further representations were made as part of this series of questioning. So on the 13th of February and on the 16th of February this year, our ambassador in the Philippines raised concerns about the prosecution and conviction of Ms Cumpio and Ms Domakil with the acting Philippine Justice Secretary, who's a minister equivalent, and also raised the matters with the Deputy Executive Secretary of Legal Affairs. After that, the embassy also raised concerns about the application of terrorism laws in the Philippines with a regional Philippine Department of Justice prosecutor. And then finally, on the 20th of May, Australian embassy officials at the political councillor level raised our concerns about the reported practice of red tagging and human rights with the Philippine Department of Justice Undersecretary. So there's been a sequence of representations on this issue.
I appreciate that, Mr. Marcello, and I appreciate the number of interactions. And I know that the Philippine Australian community who have been concerned about this would also appreciate it as well. So thank you for putting that on the record. Minister, part of the answer on notice, and I appreciate the answer and I appreciate the further details now, you said, the answer reads, the PJR VEP supports interagency coordination, institutional relationships, jail management mechanisms for violent extremist offenders and technical assistance and capacity building on anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing. Perhaps if you have the details now, but I'm more than happy for these matters to be considered and answered on notice. Can you explain in detail what agencies that is supporting? Is it the police? Is it the judiciary? Is it the police and the judiciary? And what oversight does Australia have of where the funding goes? I mean, if you know that now, Mr. Marcello, that's fine. But actually, I would appreciate a considered, detailed response on notice.
Sure.
Yep.
Senator, I think that just to reassure you, there's no funding directly from this program to the Philippine government. It's all delivered through agencies such as AUSTRAC that you mentioned. Just quickly, so the UN Office of Drugs and Crime works with Philippine prisons. The University of New England delivers technical assistance on research. The Asia Foundation builds capacity in the judicial system in the Philippines. AUSTRAC I've mentioned, and then the Department of Home Affairs works on building with Philippine law and justice agencies. So it's a range of organisations that deliver assistance with Philippine counterparts. But we can, if you like.
I would appreciate if you could articulate what those agencies are, what they're delivering, and the level of funding for each of them. But again, I thank you for the detail, Mr. Marcello. Minister Tuvalu, as you know, the treaty was signed in 2023. I'm advised that in its first year of operation in 2025, between 65 and 80% of Tuvaluans applied for a visa. Is that what you understand to be the numbers?
Senator Jan Hutton, First Assistant Secretary, Pacific Integration Division. Senator, I think you're talking about the Falappelli Mobility Pathway. We have just, we're in the first year of that mobility pathway. There are 280 visas available annually, and they have all been issued this year.
Yes, but have you engaged with the Tuvalu government to validate those figures that are in the public domain, I think partly put there by former Prime Minister Sapaga, that between 65 and 80% of Tuvaluans made an application under the scheme for those visas?
Yeah.
Senator Elizabeth Peake, Head of the Office of the Pacific. Senator, one thing that's unique about the Falappelli Mobility Pathway is that it offers Tuvaluans choice. It's a unique visa, it's a unique pathway. What it does is allow Tuvaluans to have permanent residency in Australia, but there is, unlike other permanent residency visas, there is no required amount of time to stay in Australia. So Tuvaluans can go back and forth from Tuvalu to Australia, which is a critical aspect of the visa, and one deliberately designed so that Tuvaluans could have choice.
Yes, but my question remains. do you know, my question remains, it's in the public commentary that between 65 and 80% of Tuvaluans put application in to obtain a visa. Have you been given data and information from the Tuvaluan government? Are you able to validate those figures?
Well, Senator, I see what officials can provide, but I think we anticipated the need to ensure that there was we meaning Tuvalu in Australia, so not just the Australian government, but there was a need to ensure that this pathway was appropriately managed, which is why the number of visa grants was agreed as part of the treaty. So I just wanted to, the figure of 280 was a specifically agreed figure.
I accept that, but the part of the reason why that figure is in the public debate, which is not the 280, but 65 to 80% of Tuvaluans making the application, is the deep concern about a brain drain. I've had representations to my office that some of the most senior officials across their public sector have now received visas, which means to both Australia and New Zealand, and there is that very real concern about the brain drain. And I hear what you say about the visa, which allows travel back and forth, but the reality that,
Well, Senator, we respect the right of a Pacific country to make its own decisions rather than telling them what to do. And we entered into those negotiations on that basis. And I've spoken before at length about the wisdom of the leaders of Tuvalu, who, unlike most political leaders, are thinking about how they preserve their culture and identity in decades to come in the face of climate change. It really is an extraordinary act of leadership. They are the ones who have thought through the issues that you raise and, in part, have dealt with them by way of the numbers I have outlined, as well as other parts of the agreement which the officers can speak to.
Well, Minister, speaking about Tuvaluan leaders, former Prime Minister Sopoaga has said this: everything was being whitewashed by economic partnerships and job opportunities. He then said, but the position of Australia is not to commit any reduction of greenhouse gases that is burning Tuvalu. And then he described the arrangements because of that as interventionists, and another word he used was imperialistic. Are you aware of those comments, and are you aware of the ongoing concerns that visas is one thing, but unless Australia deals with greenhouse gases, which is the fundamental existential threat to Tuvalu, those criticisms you would expect to continue, wouldn't you?
Senator, we're aware of the former opposition leaders' comments on climate change, and it's no surprise that a country as vulnerable as Tuvalu to the impacts of climate change continues to express deep concerns about that. We have, through the Falapili visa, but indeed the whole treaty, stood side by side with Tuvalu and indeed have supported one of the biggest land reclamations in Tuvalu to give Tuvaluans more choice to stay in Tuvalu in the face of climate change. We have also made significant investments in digital capability, undersea cables, education and health to allow maximum choice for Tuvaluans. And this, the final comment I would make is we started with a figure of 280 as an appropriate figure to manage these issues. We have always said that Tuvalu could adjust that as required if it turns out not to be the right figure from their perspective.
All right. I just, given the lateness, Minister, you'll be sad to know this is my final issue that I wish to raise with you, which I'll move on to.
I was going to rotate the call because I think you've had 20 minutes. So
well, should we just?
Well, we can just finish.
All right.
There's little we agree on, but I think the Minister and I think that would be a good thing. The Minister, you recall last time I asked you about what Australia's position on the Donald Trump's Board of Peace.
Done all the questions again that we did in February, but why don't I?
Well, because you said in February. The reason I'm asking, you said in February you were considering it.
I'm just going to.
And you're looking at it.
Sorry,
it's now May.
Senator, I'm just going to ask officials to come to the table.
So in February you said you'll need to look at it, whether or not we join the Board of Peace. Have you looked at it? And surely we're not going to join it, are we?
Senator Angela Robinson, First Assistant Secretary, Multilateral Policy and Human Rights Division. We don't have a significant update for you since last estimates. We haven't made a decision on whether to join the Board of Peace. We're watching how things develop.
So what has been done in terms of the consideration of the Board of Peace?
We made a decision not to participate in a meeting on the 19th of February.
Sorry, Minister, which meeting?
The Board of Peace.
The Board of Peace. You made a decision not to participate in that. Have there been any other decisions made in relation to the matter? Any other invitations that have been issued?
No, Senator. That meeting on the 19th of February was the inaugural and only so far meeting of the Board of Peace, and we did not attend that.
And speaking of peace in the Middle East, Minister, your website has, your ministerial website has your TV interview with Sky News and Kieran Gilbert on the 10th of October 2025 on it. And in it, Mr Gilbert is asking you at that time about the arrangements that Donald Trump had negotiated with Benjamin Netanyahu in relation to Gaza as at 10th of October. And he said this: in relation to the United States and its approach to this, Donald Trump, there's some talk of him getting the Nobel Peace Prize. Would you support that? Do you think that would be a good move? To which you said, well, certainly this peace plan is historically unprecedented, and you know this has been the biggest contribution to peace that we have seen in a very long time. Mr Gilbert then said, so you wouldn't be opposed to the idea? And then you say, obviously it's a matter for the committee, but this has been the greatest contribution to peace in the Middle East for a generation or more. Do you stand by those comments, that Donald Trump's actions as at October 2025 were the greatest contribution to peace in the Middle East for a generation or more?
What was the first time we had seen the US broker that a ceasefire in those circumstances? I think, do I stand by my comments that that is a matter for the Nobel Committee? That's a statement of fact, I think, Senator.
No, the bit that I'm asking you, if you wish to revisit, is whether or not Donald Trump's actions were, to quote the greatest contribution to peace in the Middle East for a generation or more.
I know I've had experience, and it might have been with your colleague's office, not with yours, where answers I give are to one question a splice for social media purposes against another question.
I do not do that.
Some of your
reject
colleagues
any
do
suggestion that
no,
I would ever
so
do
I want to be really clear.
I reject any suggestion.
I have. I think my comments in October were in relation to the situation in October. A lot has happened in the Middle East since. We were pleased that, as I said, I think it was yesterday or the day before in media, that President Trump had made clear to Mr Netanyahu that he should not proceed with an attack on or bombardment, or I can't recall what was reported, escalation in Beirut. I would assume you would also think that that is the right thing to do. The US it's our principal ally. It is we know that President Trump envisages a very different role from the United States in the world. We also know, and as is demonstrated by events, the US remains the world's largest economic and military power with daily influence. So, you know, we should continue to be active in shaping our alliance. We should continue to be active in pressing our view. At times our views differ and the Australian government does not resolve from that. And over the 75 years of the alliance, we've had differences of approach, we've had differences of views, and this government will always assert our sovereignty, our agency, and we will always seek to make decisions in Australia's national interests.
Of course, since those statements you made in October of 2025, Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu have now commenced a disastrous war of choice against Iran. Your government was, I think, the first government on the planet to support and indicate support for that war of choice. Do you regret that now when you look at the appalling damage that has done to Iran and the region, the appalling, devastating damage it's done to Australia's economy through energy prices? Do you regret your government being the first government to have supported Donald Trump's war of choice?
Senator Shoebridge, I think the context of that statement was about making certain that Iran did not obtain a nuclear weapon. Now, I will ask Dr. King to elaborate on that aspect, but, you know, there was a very clear reference to that objective in that statement.
Well, Tulsi Gabbard gave evidence to the US Congress in her position as United States Director of National Intelligence, unambiguous evidence that it was the consensus position of US intelligence agencies that Iran was not rebuilding its nuclear capability, and that the attacks that happened in June of last year had not only absolutely attacked Iran's capacity, but there had been no evidence of them rebuilding the capacity since June of last year. You're aware of that, weren't you, Secretary?
That's a statement?
Were you aware of her evidence? You say that you give as a rationale for a war of choice commenced in February that it prevents Iran from developing a nuclear weapon. You say that, notwithstanding the fact that the US Director of National Intelligence made it clear that it was the consensus position of US security agencies that there was no such credible threat at that time.
With respect, I'm not going to take as read things that you say about what other people have said, because I find often you have a particular perspective which informs the way in which you describe it. That's the first point. The second point is, again, to be absolutely clear, this government has been calling for a ceasefire for some time. All right, so we have made that clear. The Secretary has also outlined correctly that the view the government expressed was that it was a long-standing position of Australia and in our interest that Iran should be prevented from obtaining a nuclear weapon. Now, you can have you've had plenty of opportunity over months to put a view about that. We are at a point where we are all seeking to support a ceasefire across the region, including in Lebanon, and the government, the Prime Minister, myself and others have called for that for some time. And I note there was some public statement today while we were dealing with other issues about potential ceasefire negotiated between the US, Lebanon and Israel. And if that is the case, that is a good outcome.
Yeah. Well, Minister, my final question is this. Yes, I belong to a party of peace that opposes war, and I'm absolutely clear about that, and so is my party. And you say that you support a ceasefire, and I accept that. Do you not regret supporting the start of the war in the first place?
Well, we did not. I've got this. You call it a war of choice. We did not choose to start this war, and we are not participating in the conflict as in taking any offensive action. So it's not. This is the point I made, I think, on Insiders. You want, for your own political reasons, to construe this as if this is the Liberal government and this is Iraq. This is not. We did not make a decision to start this conflict. We did not ask the Australian people to accept Australians being committed to this conflict. It is not. We are not John Howard, and this is not Iraq. We made our position clear about the interest Australia has, the world has, in Iran not obtaining a nuclear weapon. We have provided some defensive capability to our friends and colleagues, United Arab Emirates and others, and the government has been very clear about the need for de-escalation and ceasefire.
Minister,
so
you
can
said,
you please not?
Yes.
I know that it has been something you have wanted to do, to try and make this John Howard and Iraq in the Iraq War. That is not how this government has approached this.
I asked you whether you regretted your government supporting the war, and I do so because this is what your Prime Minister said on the 28th of February. We support the United States acting to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon and to prevent Iran continuing to threaten international peace and security. He made that statement at the start of the war. Does your government regret giving that support to this US war of choice?
It's the same question I've responded.
Well,
Okay. We're going to break. We'll be back here at 1:45. I understand Senator Sharma has another 45 minutes worth of questions. So
40 minutes.
To be honest, I think we all need a break if that's going to be the case.
40 minutes from Senator Sharma.
So I'll give everyone about a 10-minute break, quick cup of coffee, stretch your legs, go to the bathroom, back here in 10. Sorry. Not my fault, but other senators have questions.
I guarantee they're not going to be able to do it. I wonder if Senator Sharma could give us some indication of the topics so we could at least be efficient. Senator Shoebridge was happy to give me the 5 or 6 topics. If you just let us know, we can make sure officials are prepped.
Some development assistance, so Asian Development Bank and the OECD Development Assistance Committee review. The 2026 Water Polo World Cup finals in Sydney.
I'm sorry, the 2026 water polo. Oh, this is the Russian athletes.
First Nations ambassador. Our embassy in Ukraine. And I think that's probably it.
Thank you.
So should we start with the ADB? Hi, Mr. Isbister. So we're increasing our funding to the ADB in the 2026-27 budget. I just wanted to canvass some concerns that I know we've publicly expressed before about the ADB. I know the previous International Development Minister, Pat Conroy, expressed concerns about the branding on ADB projects and a lack of visible Australian branding on projects that were being built by Chinese enterprises, amongst others. Has that concern been addressed, and if so, how?
Senator, it's certainly an issue that we've been focused on over a number of years, and we've really stepped up our engagement with the bank over the last couple of years, obviously led by very much engagement by Minister Conroy, but also by senior officials, including by Executive Director at the board in Manila. We've made it very clear what our expectations are on 2 things. One of them about the importance of infrastructure projects financed by the ADB to actually generate broader economic benefits and opportunities for countries, particularly in small island states. And that needs to be a very strong focus on value. It isn't just lowest cost. And that being looking at ways of driving employment and opportunities for small, medium enterprises in the Pacific. And the second issue, as you flagged, is very much on branding, and I think it has improved. There's been significant improvements, and we've raised concerns where we've seen poor performance, things that we think have breached issues, and we've asked the ADB to look at their own procurement policies on it. The last thing I'll say is that we've also been working with the US and others on a new procurement policy and approach, both with the ADB and with the World Bank, on how infrastructure financing is done in a way that provides greater transparency and greater confidence in the opportunities and benefits it delivers to those countries that financing has been provided to.
Yeah, thank you. So have any specific reforms been undertaken by the ADB or commitments made on project branding?
Well, the World Bank, I'll touch quickly on 2 things. One, on the reforms, the World Bank has committed to now making it mandatory that 30% of all projects have local content to them, and the ADB is committed to 50% of all projects now having local content, and that's an issue we're now looking at how that gets reflected in all contracts that go forward. On branding, there has been agreements now that where there's clear breaches of those arrangements of branding that doesn't reflect the financing and the role of the ADB, is taken on board in terms of consideration of any future tenders that company would be eligible for going forward.
So if the contracting entity...
If the contractor is seen to have breached systemically their requirements on branding, that would then be a consideration or exemption for their ability to bid for future contracts.
So have we seen any contractors being punished? Or
we haven't to date, but we have since that policy has been brought in a lot more strongly, a very clear change in behaviour in terms of how contractors are not reflecting their own brands and the signage and branding of the finances and ADB being reflected.
Okay, so you're seeing an improvement there. You're not seeing the same incidence
Yes.
of this sort of branding behaviour that Minister Conroy raised.
Can I just ask a question on that?
Yeah, of course.
I'm so sorry, but Is it the case that they can easily change to a subsidiary or something and it's difficult to track?
Well, I mean, there are challenges as parent companies that then have, as you know, subsidiary arrangements. It's one of the issues we've asked the banks to be making sure that there's a clearer understanding of what the ownership structure of particularly state-owned enterprises are.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr Isbister. And then last year, media here reported that 5 ADB projects had been awarded to a conglomerate, TBEA, I believe it is, which has close ties with US sanctioned entities in Xinjiang and reportedly taken part in surplus labour transfers in China, so companies with significant modern slavery or human rights concerns. How did the government respond to those?
I think you're referring to a project in the power sector in Papua New Guinea.
I'm not sure where it was. So
Yeah, well, if it's the one you're referring to, which was TBEA, Tibetan Electrical Apparatus Stock. We're aware of the articles. We raised them with the ADB, including through our executive director, and asked them to consider on the issues. We've also asked the ADB and working with them on strengthening the environment and social safeguards framework, which is taking into effect in January this year as a result of the improvement. This has been an issue, obviously, that not alone, but with the US and a range of other countries, we're looking at how the issue around environmental social safeguards, and particularly in terms of the issues around solar panels and others, that we have confidence in relation to the supply chains and that are put in place. But yes, so it was both acted on, both in terms of in Papua New Guinea, but also with the executive director and the board in Manila.
So we asked the ADB to undertake a review into this?
We asked them to take a review into it, but also working with them on strengthening the environmental social safeguards framework, which they've done, and that's taking into effect from January.
Okay, so what did this review find, though?
The review, we still, I think, haven't got back the findings in relation to what they've identified on it. I mean, I think, as you can imagine, one of the things that the ADB does, it is a challenge, as it is for many companies, is being able to have contractors will agree and tick the box and comply with that none of the equipment they produce or sources is from issues of modern slavery. But for the ADB, it is often, like it is for others, difficult to be able to then verify the elements of it. But they certainly, we've asked them to come back and let us know what the outcome of that review is.
When would we expect to get that outcome of that review?
I'll take it on notice. I'll take it on notice and come back to you, Senator.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. That's all I had on the ADB. Are you the right person for the OECD Development Assistance Committee review?
Likely to be.
Okay, thank you.
Otherwise, my colleague, Mr. White.
So I understand that the DAC review, that was the first one since about 2018?
Yeah, every 5 years. It's sort of slightly delayed, I think, because of COVID.
Okay. And do we respond to the recommendations in the DAC review? How does it work?
It's a pretty rigorous process. It's a process where a team comes out, they visit Australia, they consult with government, with NGOs, the development sector. They visit, in this instance, they visited Tonga and Dili, Timor-Leste, and I think did a conversation or discussions with Tonga. We then went over and they prepared the report. There was a delegation that I led that went to the OECD to talk through the findings and recommendations in significant detail. We had the peak body ACFID, the CEO of that, Matthew Morey, participated in that and provided their perspective on it. The report has been finalised, and we have broadly accepted most of the recommendations and look at how we take them on board in terms of the ongoing development of our own systems and reviews.
So you agree with the findings, is that right?
Well,
I mean, largely?
But broadly, the findings we agree with. I think there's elements of it that we don't necessarily all accept. There's elements that they raise around how we should be utilising or how we're utilising contractors in certain instances. I think from our perspective, we're the largest donor in the Pacific. We're a significant donor in Southeast Asia, and looking at how we utilise the right development partners in different environments is something which we think we've got to continue to review, continue to sort of respond to, and shouldn't be necessarily informed by a certain percentage or a certain level of funding going to contractors. So I think in the broad, many of the recommendations we have accepted, Senator, but I wouldn't say that we've unilaterally accepted all of the recommendations.
Okay, because they do seem to highlight a reliance on managing contractors. They cite a figure that I think of 48 prime contracts, 96% was to a small set of contractors registered in Australia. And I've also heard this from parts of the development community in Australia, that what they would say is an over-reliance on managing contractors, but you don't agree with that characterisation?
Well, no, I mean, I think the way that we design programs with governments is we have developed country development plans that are consulted with countries. We identify what the sectors and areas they want us to partner with, and then through that we then worked on designs of who's going to be best positioned to deliver that. We work with multilateral partners. As I think you asked earlier, with the current fuel crisis, we look at how we work with governments directly on economic and budget support elements. But there are some quite complex infrastructure programs, quite complex governance programs that in discussions with governments and that we believe contractors are the ones who are best positioned to deliver those. We have substantial partnerships with development, with NGOs. The government increased the funding to NGOs in this budget to $150 million. We've increased the volunteers program, and NGOs are an important part of our humanitarian response.
And will we publish, how do you formally respond to these recommendations? Do you do a formal response, or?
I mean, every country makes their own determination as how they want to deal with it. We do evaluations constantly on our programs, which we make available. As I said, we travelled to, engaged and invited the ACFID to respond to the report in Paris and the OECD. So we're not looking at doing any further written response to the report. We feel we've engaged, we've provided feedback in response to it, and we're considering how we take on the recommendations as need be in an ongoing delivery of the program.
But so do you intend to implement all the recommendations, or some of them? This is what I'm just trying to
we
understand.
certainly are taking on the recommendations. I wouldn't say that we, as I said earlier, we're not unilaterally accepting all of them. And as I said, we don't necessarily agree with all the assumptions they've come to on.
Senator, if I can add, Aidan White, Acting First Assistant Secretary, Development Policy and Equality Division. I think it's also some of the recommendations that there are other vehicles that we think are actually better to address those in an iterative way. For example, there's a lot of discussion in the report around conflict prevention. We currently have an inquiry into the role of the development program in addressing conflict prevention. Recommendations looking at budget, again, are best addressed through the budget process. In addition, we would note that the majority of OECD DAC members don't publish formal management responses, and a key part of it is that focus on peer learning rather than a formal accountability mechanism.
Okay, thank you. Could I ask now about the First Nations ambassador? I understand one of the outcomes of the First Nation ambassador's role is to develop a strategy for a First Nations approach to foreign policy.
Is that a question?
Yeah, sorry, yeah, could someone confirm that? Yes, please, sorry. Is that right? Part of the outcome is to, or the output is to develop a First Nations strategy? Or a strategy for a First Nations approach to foreign policy?
Senator Elizabeth Peake, Head of the Office of the Pacific, certainly under the Office of First Nations International Engagement, there's work being progressed on a strategy in terms of where the office and where the ambassador can most effectively deploy their resources.
So has the strategy been developed?
The strategic work continues, and the strategy is in development.
Right. I understand that there was a consultant engaged with the purpose of helping develop this strategy. I believe the consultant was Inside Policy Proprietary Limited. Contract value was $266,000. The contract ended on the 31st of December. So I'd expected that they were engaged to help develop the strategy. Was that not the case?
Senator, I think we've had some changes in the lineup since that was first done, so maybe Dr Lee can add.
Hi, Dr Lee.
Thank you, Senator. Justin Lee, First Assistant Secretary, Melanesia Division. You're correct that there was an external provider, Inside Policy, to help with the work on the strategy. They were specifically to help with consultations, external consultations on the strategy, and they assisted with over 100 consultations that the ambassador and his staff held in development of that, in the ongoing development of that strategy.
So when do you expect the strategy to be delivered?
As was said by Ms Peake, that work is continuing at the moment. We don't have a confirmed date.
But will there be a strategy?
Sorry, I think I'll stand to be corrected, but I think it's better to understand strategy in terms of the direction that has been decided on for the work of the ambassador, so not a document as such. So the consultations and the initial work was about where the priorities for the ambassador's work should lie, and that's been reflected in what he has actually been doing as opposed to a document.
Okay, so can you explain the strategy to me then, what he has actually been doing?
I can explain the priorities that I have indicated and have determined, and they are really very, very precise. The first is to deepen Australia's partnerships in the Pacific, including, as you would know, Senator, through the shared cultural histories and stories, particularly with Melanesia. And the second is to expand First Nations trade and investment opportunities. And the ambassador's team has now moved into Office of the Pacific to support those priorities.
So how is the ambassador delivering on these priorities?
Senator...
I'm just trying to understand the role and its purpose and what it's achieving and how you're measuring.
Yeah. Senator, the Ambassador for First Nations makes a material impact on our objective of a prosperous, stable and peaceful region. So to give you one example, just last week after the announcement of the new government in the Solomon Islands, I went to the Solomon Islands with Ambassador Mohammed. We spoke with the new government. We prepared his incoming visit that we've seen over the last 2 days, and some of the outcomes that were announced that I mentioned earlier in estimates can be directly attributed to the conversations that both Ambassador Mohammed and I have had.
So Ambassador Mohammed is now housed within the Pacific Division?
Yes.
And is mainly doing Pacific diplomatic work?
That is one of his priorities, and one of the major priorities given the deep connections between First Nations people in Australia and those of the region.
And what are the other priorities?
I think Foreign Minister just outlined them, which is...
What was this consultancy engaged for, though? I just don't quite understand, because you engaged this consultancy, it cost $266,000. I thought it was to help develop a strategy, but I'm told the strategy sort of doesn't actually exist, or it exists in the ether, or it's just understood by everyone.
What I said, Senator, was that the strategy, the consultation and the process of setting up the office and the initial body of work that was done on broad community consultation was about identifying the strategic priorities of the work of the ambassador. And those strategic priorities are reflected in what he has actually been doing with the support of the office. So that's my explanation to you as to what the strategy has resulted in.
Okay, so what were the consultations that this consulting company undertook? Was that with the ambassador?
Well, this was in the early days of setting up the office.
I think that only ended last year, 31 December.
So those an early process of consultations, was a few years back now.
Well, it's less than 6 months ago that the contract ended.
Senator, can I also take on notice the figure that you mentioned there of the cost of the contract? Because the figure that I have is $152,900.
Okay.
So if I can take on notice that figure for that assistance with those consultations.
Yeah, so the contract number is CN4105976 is what I've got here. So have those consultations that this contractor was doing, were those consultations, did they involve the ambassador?
That's my understanding. That's right.
Is the ambassador here?
No, he's not.
Okay. Are those consultations going to be repeated? Like, is this part of a regular process? Who are the consultations with?
I'd have to take that on notice, Senator.
Okay. What other work has the ambassador been doing? So Ms Peake, you mentioned the trip to the Solomon Islands. Secretary said his strategic priorities are reflected in what he's been doing. What else has he been doing?
Well, we've been through in previous estimates work on the trade side, which can be covered in tomorrow's estimates. We've also been through in previous estimates work in support of UN and WIPO work concerning biodiversity. Sorry, I can't think of the proper. Thank you.
So yeah, I mean, just to quickly elaborate on it, he was involved in working with the Trade Division on the UAE FTA, which included the First Nations chapter on it. He's, as the Secretary said, been involved in leading engagements and support from First Nations participation in forums, in multilateral forums in the UN. He's had a role as Ms Peake said, around how we really expand and accelerate the engagement with First Nations communities between Australia and the Pacific. So there's a range of those streams. All those streams are elements that have fed into the strategy that has been discussed.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand what the office has done lately, like in the last 6 months or since the last estimates. So there's the trip to the Solomon Islands.
We'll give you some further information on notice.
Okay, if I could get key outcomes, travel, engagements over the last 6 months on notice, and the cost of those too, please. Thank you. That was all on that topic. Could I ask now about the 2026 World Water Polo World Cup finals that are being hosted in Sydney in July, and the participation of Russian and Belarusian national teams? Who should I direct that to? You, Mr Hurst?
Yeah. Christian Hurst, First Assistant Secretary, Europe Division, Senator. Yes, look, we were disappointed that the World Aquatics body allowed Russia to re-enter the Federation and to be able to participate in the World Cup. Our view is that all international federations should follow the IOC model here, and the Russian state should not be able to participate.
And have we made those views known?
We have.
World Aquatics. What is the governing body? World Aquatics, is that right?
World Aquatics, yeah.
How do we make those views known?
I'll take that on notice, Senator.
Okay. When did they make this decision to lift their ban on the participation of Russian and Belarusian national teams?
It was relatively recently, but I'll take on notice the precise date.
Okay.
It's not a decision of government.
Understand.
Perhaps I can assist with that one. Julie Heckscher, First Assistant Secretary of the Regulatory and Legal Policy Division. According to my notes, on 13th of April 2026, World Aquatics announced its decision to allow athletes from Russia and Belarus to compete with full national representation at all events.
So what does that mean in a practical sense for us as hosts?
Well, perhaps if I can mention what it really means is that because the event is hosted in Australia, and of course I'm not an expert on water polo or how it runs, but the team would be entitled to participate in Australia. Of course, anyone travelling to Australia, whether in a team to participate or officials or coaches or the like, would have to meet our normal border control, sanctions requirements and the like. Basically, they would actually have to ensure, they would have to go through Migration Act processing that Home Affairs would be responsible for. If there were, for example, anyone who was listed for sanctions, for Australian sanctions, that would be picked up by Home Affairs. If they were subject to travel bans, they would not be able to enter. We would have to consider sanctions risks of any, if there were any sanctions risks associated with Russian or Belarusian teams competing. But essentially, Australian sanctions would not prevent a team or individuals travelling to Australia unless they themselves were listed for travel bans by Australia.
So the prospect is that the Russian and Belarusian national teams are competing under their national flags in Sydney in July next month. Is that right?
As a consequence of a decision made by a sporting authority with which we do not agree. So I assume, Senator Salma, you no longer have the view that you had some years ago, where you said to manage the rise of China, it is time to rehabilitate the strategic triangle and reshuffle the deck. This time the actor which needs to be brought in from the cold is Russia. Russia, while still a global power, is today driven by insecurity, not ambition. I assume you don't stand by those words anymore?
That was written, Minister, but I'm so glad you've read it, and I'm so glad you keep it close.
I found it really interesting that you think that they were driven by insecurity, not ambition, just before they invaded Ukraine.
No, I would say that I did write it before they invaded Ukraine.
So you were wrong then?
Well, I mean, I wrote it at a point in time, but I don't think we're here to talk about my op-ed. Flattered as I am.
Were you wrong? Or
flattered as I am, Minister,
are you holding to the position?
I'm actually here to
No,
ask
I'm very
questions.
interesting because there's something about your personality.
Well,
so do you accept that you were wrong?
Why don't we catch up for dinner or coffee?
I really don't want to, but that's fine.
Well, I don't want to either, Minister, so let's just stick
I'm
to
interested to know whether you're prepared to concede a mistake or really not.
No, we're not actually here to discuss my views.
Isn't that an interesting observation? You won't even concede that you were wrong to say Russia should be brought in from the cold just before the invasion of Ukraine. That tells us all something, Senator.
I don't actually think this is the right forum for us to be having this conversation.
It's quite
I'm interested
remarkable.
in the issues. But I am glad you follow closely what I write.
Well, no, I think it's an important character trait to be able to say, yes, I made a mistake.
Can I ask?
I think that's the good
What
thing.
options?
I want to go out for dinner, come on. You going to shout dinner?
No, thank you.
Not you, but
No.
him.
Well, you can go out and see if he's prepared to concede to you he's ever made a mistake.
I'll give you a brief, yeah.
Can I ask what options we have available to us?
We're not bringing Russia in from the cold. How about that?
I'm asking some serious questions here, Mr. I know you've had your fun now.
No, it's not fun.
No, exactly. It's a
not
serious
fun.
topic.
It's not fun. I think it was ridiculous. Sorry,
I don't think the Ukrainian community
I
finds
think
it
that
funny.
position was wrong at the time, And I think it's remarkable that you're not prepared to say it was wrong even today.
Well, we're not talking about this.
We have made our position on Russia clear. We've made our position on sanctions clear, and we've made our position in relation to the decision of, is it Water Polo Federation clear?
World Aquatics. No, I do actually
World
want to pursue
Aquatics.
this issue because I'm not going to be brushed off by references to op-eds written several years ago. What are our options?
Well, it's a decision of the Federation.
Well, have we started to look whether any of these teams or their individuals are on our sanctions list?
We
Does
don't.
that work
We
commence?
don't.
We will if they are going, when we know individuals who will travel.
Yeah, we're not going to comment on sanctions enforcement, Senator.
Well, the Russian Aquatics Federation chair, for instance, is on Australia's sanctions list.
If you have information in relation to sanctions breaches, then you should provide that.
This is publicly available information, Minister. I'm sure that's the sort of work your department would do. Ms Heckscher, are you aware that the Russian Aquatics Federation chair, Mr
Dmitry Mazepin, yes, he is sanctioned by Australia and has been sanctioned for some time. As the Minister and the Secretary said, the normal course of events, we would expect to be notified who the team members were. Sanctions, whether or not anyone seeking to come to Australia was on a sanctions list would be something that was considered, of course. And if someone was subject to a travel ban under sanctions, then that would be something that would be considered very closely.
So when you say considered, does that mean they wouldn't automatically be prevented from coming to Australia?
Well, a travel ban prevents someone coming to Australia, yes.
And there's no discretion to waive that?
We're not going to be waiving any.
Well, this is what I'm asking.
Well, no, that's not what you're asking, but I'm responding to what is the inference. We're not going to be waiving travel bans that are in place.
And how do we deal with sanctioned entities? Because I understand there's a prize pool that attaches to this.
As I mentioned when I sort of ran through the sanctions issues earlier, sanctions apply to activities within Australia and to activities by Australians anywhere in the world. If there were any sanctions issues arising, including in relation, for example, to payments of prize money, of course, Australian government isn't going to be paying that prize money itself. That's a matter for the World Aquatics organisation. Then we would clearly be engaged if there were sanctions breaches. These are all hypothetical questions. As I mentioned, we would look at sanctions issues if they arose.
Have you begun discussing this issue with Home Affairs?
In the normal course of events, yes, we do. We discuss all of these sorts of events, visitors to Australia, any of these sorts of issues, especially when they involve visitors from countries that are sanctioned by Australia. Yes, we do. And yes, we will.
Okay. Thank you. That was all I had on that topic. Can I ask now about our mission in Ukraine, our embassy in Ukraine? Who's that best directed to?
Yep.
Mr Hurst? So it's been operational since when?
Senator, it reopened, the staff returned on the 28th of January 2025, so yeah.
On the, sorry, the
28th of January 2025.
And how many staff are based there?
So we have 6 staff, A-based staff, 4 DFAT and 2 defence.
So 6 A-based staff, 4 DFAT, 2 defence. Yep. And how many locally engaged staff?
So locally engaged staff, we have 5, 4 supporting DFAT and 1 supporting defence.
And is the embassy in the same chancery that it was in before it was temporarily closed?
It is co-located with the Canadian chancery.
Okay. And can I ask how you manage and mitigate the risks, security and otherwise, to the staff there?
We're not going to be discussing that in a public forum.
Well, I'm just interested in their welfare, and I did notice that the
so are we.
Secretary in the opening statement.
Well, we are interested in their welfare, which is why we didn't open the embassy, despite you and others criticising us, until we were satisfied it was safe to do so. And when we meant safe to do so, it meant we had in place the arrangements that we had confidence in to keep our people safe.
And what are the leave arrangements for the staff there?
So yeah, they have a rotation system. So they have 56 days in country and 28 days out of the country. That's for the DFAT staff.
And how long are the postings?
So they're a 1 year with an option for a 1 year extension.
Okay. So the current ambassador's been there over a year?
Current ambassador has been there for around 2
year and a
months. Just recently changed.
Just recently.
Changeover.
Okay. No, thank you. I did just want to acknowledge the dangerous environment they're in and the work that they are doing. And I know you mentioned it in your opening statement, Secretary, but I do, also the Coalition does appreciate the work they're doing in a difficult and tough and challenging operational environment.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Almost the last question, but not quite. Bangladesh, the new government in Bangladesh. Could I just ask what level of engagement we've had with the new government in Bangladesh?
Thanks, Senator Sharma. Sarah Story, South and Central Asia Division. Could you please repeat the question about Bangladesh?
Yeah, I was just interested in the level of engagement we've had with the relatively new government in Bangladesh.
Thank you. We've had a very strong engagement with the incoming government elected earlier this year and met with congratulations messages from the Foreign Minister. Our head of mission has been progressively working her way through meeting most of the cabinet. In fact, just this afternoon I was reading her report on meeting the Defence Minister. So close engagement.
And are there any visits expected or bilateral visits or encounters at multilateral meetings at the ministerial level?
I wouldn't comment on ministerial planning, but certainly at senior officials level, we've now instituted annual talks, both senior officials talks, defence talks, and also trade investment framework talks.
Okay. And the new constitution is now, new constitutional arrangements in Bangladesh are all now in place, is that right, or are they being...
The referendum that took part, that was part of the electoral process, I'd need to get back to you on the exact detail of its status, but it did pass at the election.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Senator.
Last topic, I promised, Chair. Amendments to the Foreign Arrangement Scheme legislation. Minister, you foreshadowed in the media, I think, earlier this week, that you'll be putting forward legislation to amend the Foreign Arrangement Scheme.
Yes.
When will that legislation be introduced?
Well, it depends how long your colleagues take in to debate a whole range of legislation coming through, Senator, but I'll check what introduction date is. I think Ms Hexter should be able to assist, I hope.
Sorry, Senator, would you mind just repeating the question again?
Yeah, so I understand from media reports that the Minister plans to introduce amendments to the Foreign Arrangements, I think it's the Foreign Relations Act, isn't it? State and Territory Arrangements Act.
Yeah.
When's that likely to be introduced?
You might recall this legislation, these legislative amendments following on from the independent review. An exposure draft has been prepared, consultations have been taking place. We are hoping to introduce it once the final legislative drafting, etc., is completed as soon as we possibly can.
Is the exposure draft public?
Exposure draft is not public. It has been consulted with basically the regulated community.
Who's that? Sorry, who's the regulated?
So the regulated community. So consultations have taken place with state and territory governments, local government sector, and universities on some of the details of the draft in order to make sure that we actually have worked through the various changes.
This is always the case where obviously the next session is really tied up with tax and NDIS, but I would be hoping to introduce shortly thereafter.
Mm-hmm. And I was just, because there's not an exposure draft, there was reporting in the media, Minister, maybe you could clarify this, just about how university-to-university arrangements are likely to change as a result of this legislation. Are you able to clarify that? Will there be a greater level of oversight or scrutiny? Or?
Perhaps I can start, Senator. The exposure draft and the bill contains quite a few provisions that followed on from the recommendations made in the independent review, which was publicised. So some of those things, just to answer your question in summary terms, some of them are aimed at streamlining and reducing the administrative regulatory burden on universities, local governments, state and territory governments. I won't go into all of the detail, but lifting some of the notification procedures, streamlining the portal and the registration processes, some of those sorts of steps. Some of them were in relation to basically universities that are captured by the scheme, as in foreign universities that are captured by the scheme. As reported in the press, there's some additional things that we are working on, which includes an additional power for the Foreign Minister to impose conditions when giving effect to both core and non-core arrangements. So that's arrangements affecting state and territory government dealings, university dealings, local government dealings, also offshore campuses. But there's quite a few provisions that will reduce the regulatory burden of the scheme and ease it as well. So there's quite a few provisions in the legislation.
Okay. Could you just read from your media report? I think it's in today's Australian. I just wanted to understand it better. It says here, and I quote, Senator Wong is planning to amend legislation this month to grant her new powers to impose conditions on deals between state or local governments and foreign government agencies, but she has stopped short of intervening in university collaborations, which are defined as non-core arrangements, apart from closing a loophole that lets universities avoid reporting foreign collaborations in their campuses offshore. So is that accurate?
No.
Okay.
It is not actually accurate. Whilst core and non-core arrangements, if you understand the difference, a core arrangement is essentially an arrangement entered into by a state and territory government with a foreign government partner, requires pre-approval, essentially, to enter negotiations and then to enter into the arrangement. Non-core arrangements are basically everything else captured by the scheme. There are notification procedures, but approval doesn't have to be given beforehand. Just to explain the difference, the power to impose conditions will apply to both.
Core and non-core arrangements.
Both core and non-core, so all of them. It'll apply slightly differently. These details still to be worked out in the legislation, just because of the way non-core and core operate slightly differently. But it's incorrect to say that there's a difference or that there's closing a loophole. It's an additional power that we are including in the legislation, which will give us more flexibility in relation to ensuring that arrangements that are entered into align with foreign policy, take into account national security and the like. It gives us it gives us more flexibility in what we're able to do at that point.
Okay. So how will non-core arrangements be treated differently as a result of this legislation? So there's an additional power for the Foreign Minister to impose conditions.
They're already slightly different because of the way that they come to us. Pre-approval and having to do that within 30 days is the turnaround time, is state and territory governments with foreign government entities. Other non-core arrangements come to us not for pre-approval, notifications come to us, and the notification burden will be streamlined, so there'll just be one notification applying in future. So because of just the different way they come to us and at different stages, some of the detail about how we will impose conditions will change, and I can't give you all of that detail, it's still being worked through.
Strengthening of The test for institutional autonomy.
Yeah, that's the institutional autonomy provision applies to universities. One of the recommendations of the independent review was the complexity of working out which foreign universities are captured. It depends on definitions of institutional autonomy or not institutional autonomy, which can be quite complex for regulated community universities, local governments, state and territory governments to work out. So part of the legislation is to make that process a bit more streamlined and easier for the regulated community to interpret and apply.
So, I mean, this is, there were obviously a lot of, and I was on the original, this has been something both in opposition and in government. Obviously we had a focus on, I think there were a number of issues, or quite a few issues, with the former government's legislation, which is why we asked Ms Huxtable to review it and accepted her recommendations. I mean, the fundamental objective for the legislation is to both strengthen and streamline the scheme, and to provide the Minister of the Day with more the Government of the Day to the flexibility to respond to foreign policy changes. That may impact whether an arrangement remains consistent with the foreign policy national interest test. And that proposition is the case in relation to both core and non-core arrangements.
So I understand one of the proposals from the report is to, and you're touching on this, Ms Exshaw, to provide on the portal a list of foreign universities deemed not to have institutional autonomy.
Yep.
Is that part of the legislation?
That's one of the things that we're intending to deal with.
Yeah, so there's things that we can do without legislation as well, which we've already started on. Essentially, the review found that the scheme was very effective and it was being very effectively implemented. But it also recognised there were things that we could do, as the Minister said, to streamline and reduce the administrative burden, whilst enabling us to focus on higher risk entities. So, for example, the removal, one of the recommendations was the removal of notification of Five Eyes arrangements. So those are some of the things. Reduction of burden, streamlining, strengthening the focus on high-risk arrangements, which obviously we want to actually focus a lot of attention on higher risk arrangements. So none of these really are filling loopholes. These are strengthening, streamlining, reducing administrative burden and making what is an effective scheme even more focused, targeted and effective.
And the point I was trying to make before, which is to recognising that this is not fixed in time. So if you have an arrangement that might have been consistent with our foreign policy and national security or national interest at a point in time, events may then render it less so. So you need to have some capacity to not only deal with something at the commencement of the arrangement.
And who will compile this list of foreign universities that are deemed not to have institutional autonomy? Who will?
So there is currently in the legislation, I think you probably know, there's a set of criteria already in the legislation to help determine that. There are already countries that have been identified in which universities don't have, are considered not to have institutional autonomy. So there is already a number of countries have already been worked through as arrangements have been put forward as part of seeing whether they fall within the scope. So DFAT essentially, but where we need to consult, we will consult. This is, we spend a lot of time consulting universities, but also working with other agencies through any issues that come up in the scheme.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, well that concludes today's proceedings. As you know, we'll be back here tomorrow with the Trade Portfolio Program. So I want to thank Minister Wong, Ms Adams, officers of the department and everyone else who gave evidence. Thank you, Hansard, Broadcasting Secretariat. Have a good night, everyone. I declare this hearing today closed.